Allora, benvenute e benvenuti, autorità, signore e signori. Siamo molto lieti di celebrare e rinnovare anche in questa occasione i nostri vincoli ideali e culturali con la Fondazione Balzan, fondati sin dalle origini sull'autonomia e la libertà della ricerca scientifica. La Fondazione Balzan è infatti ormai largamente nota in tutto il mondo come promotrice delle arti e delle scienze e dei valori di umanità, fratellanza e amicizia fra i popoli. Tutto ciò sotto il segno della libertà e dell'autonomia. Sono i principi ai quali Lina Balzan, sull'esempio del padre Eugenio, volle che si ispirasse la Fondazione, imperniata saldamente sulla collaborazione italo-svizzera, europea e internazionale, con un esempio di rara e concorde unità di intenti che ne costituisce il patrimonio che la contraddistingue e che viene gelosamente custodito. In questi 80 anni, grazie alle scelte del Consiglio della Fondazione Balzan, premio, e del Comitato Generale Premi, il premio Balzan ha raggiunto un prestigio di assoluta eminenza presso gli scienziati, le istituzioni culturali e politiche e nell'opinione pubblica. Uno dei suoi caratteri distintivi, come sapete, e originali, è la volontà di individuare ogni anno diverse materie per le quali bandire i premi, garantendo così la possibilità di affrontare questioni fondamentali talvolta non individuate dalle correnti inerziali e più ovvie che anche nelle scelte scientifiche si possono manifestare. E assicurando altresì lo sforzo di premiare i migliori, come le sue scelte, non raramente anticipatrici anche di quelle di altri pur importanti premi, come è stato dimostrato, anche recentemente dall'assegnazione del premio Nobel 2022 per la fisica ad un premiato Balzan. Il sodalizio ideale fra l'Accademia Nazionale dei Lincei e la Fondazione Balzan riceve anche in questa occasione un ulteriore avallo e perpetua l'orgoglio di una collaborazione così fruttuosa. Grazie e buon lavoro. La parola al Presidente Alberto Quadio Curzi.
Distinguished participants, I'm going to read my short opening speech in English because I am here as President of the Board of Balzan Prize Foundation. Otherwise, I should speak Italian, or I say often, a little bit joking, I should speak Latin, because in our back we have the picture both of Galileo Galilei and Federico Cesi, who wrote together a very famous pamphlet, La libertà di filosofare in naturalibus, which means freedom of philosophy in natural sciences and in naturalibus, which is untranslatable in a certain way. Today, 5 outstanding scholars are being honored, 3 in natural sciences, Robert Langer, Dorte Dar Jensen, Hans Horlemans, and 2 humanities, Martha Nussbaum and Philip Bormann. These outstanding personalities will be presented by Professor Maiani, President of the General Prize Commission of the Foundation. I have to say that yesterday we had an impressive forum. In my memory, one of the most interesting since I am a member of Balzan Foundation. The discussion, the presentation of the 5 prize winners were really admirable. And the discussion was very interesting indeed. So many thanks to the prize winner for what yesterday and in their life made along years. I want to express my gratitude to the Swiss ambassadors, Dr. Schulze, and the delegators of many, many embassies, United States and Canada mainly, who are here. And of course, it's a pleasure to see here Dr. Girgis, who is the president of Balzan Foundation Fondo, and of course, Professor Maiani, and last but not least, Professor Antonelli, who chair the Accademia Nazionale dei Lincei, which hosts us, as usual, with friendship and prestige. I have to say something about the Balzan and about the success of the history of Balzan, which has been written by the laureates, the prize winner, by their genius, and certainly not by other geniuses. They are the genius, and we have gratitude to them for what they have done. This year, more or less, we reached the 60 years of Balzan Foundation. There are some time break along history due to many reasons. Balzan started more or less in 61, even if the first prize will be delivered in 62, and I'm going to say something about that. We have decided to publish a book with the photos and the motivation of the prizes, which are indeed not only enough to express the feelings and the gratitude of Balzan to the winner, but also for a kind of teaching to all prizes which are every year delivered. What I call the synthesis of the motivation, I think that they and the winner demonstrate how science and humanities contribute to the design of human progress, both human progress. From the international and organizational point of view, as I said before, the success is due to the Balzan system, which is composed by two foundations, the fund chaired by Giselle Musi, Girgis Musi, and the Italian one chaired by myself. It is of emblematic importance to recall that the first prize, as I said, decided in 61 but delivered in 62, went to the Nobel Foundation and was presented to King Gustavus Adolf of Sweden in Rome, was delivered by the President of the Italian Republic, Antonio Segni, 62. It was the Balzan Prize for Humanity, Peace and Fraternity among peoples, with the following motivation: for its admirable work, setting a shining example of brotherhood of all peoples all over the world, reaching beyond all borders without distinction of nationality, political interest, trends, and ideologies. That was the motivation of the first Balzan Prize. In 63, I have to say, the history of Balzan Prizes decided in 62, so the decision was the year before and the delivery was the year later, was awarded to scientists and scholars in various fields of knowledges. The prize were presented in Rome by the President delivered and presented in Rome by the President of the Italian Republic, Antonio Segni, again, and were awarded to Hindemith, Music, Germany, Kolmogorov, Mathematics, Russia, Elliot Morrison, History, United States, Carl von Frisch, Biology, Austria. 3 souls of human culture, European, American, and Russian. I don't go through the motivation, which are, after all, in the booklet, so-called libretto di sala, and you can see this motivation. But the names are very famous indeed, and so it's certainly not my capacity and duty to quote the motivation themselves. The same year, 63, the Prize for Humanity, Peace, Fraternity among people like that delivered in 62 to the King of Sweden was given to the Pope John XXIII, Giovanni XXIII, by, of course, the President of the Italian Republic, with the motivation for having contributed to maintaining peaceful relationship between nations, encouraging mutual understanding among people, and establishing contacts outside the Christian community. The award given by the President of the Italian Republic the day before the prizes to the mentioned scientists was delivered in the Vatican City for reasons of respect for another state, chief of state. But the day after, which is extremely important, the Pope went to Quirinale to listen the lectures of the 3 prize winners. He went there to recognize the importance of science, of humanities, beyond any kind of border. I don't want to go into detail of numbers and so on, because I like also round numbers, even if I have to say that 88 personality in natural science and 84 personality for the humanities have been awarded. In addition, 11 prizes to the so-called Prize Humanity, Peace, Fraternity among people. I want to stress another point which seems to me unique in the panorama of the prize, international prizes. In 2001, the decision of the Prize Foundation and the Fund Foundation decided, as we said, that half of Balzan Prize must be delivered to the young researcher who work with the winner on research projects. We had, since then, more or less 500 young researchers involved in these science processes. Among them, we have more or less found out 30 different nationalities. So I think this is a very important result of Balzan Foundation and the innovation since 2001. I have already said that Balzan system has 2 foundations which are very important indeed, the Swiss one and the Italian one. I have to, and of course the third one, the General Prize Committee, which is within the Italian one, but in a certain way is a kind of autonomous entity everywhere. I have to say that it's my duty to mention the president of the Balzan Prize Foundation a long year, Giovanni Colli, Cegidio Guazzaroni, Bruno Bottai, Enrico De Cleva. Since 2020 I am the president. It is an honor and also a responsibility. The role of the Swiss Balzan Foundation Fund has been no less important because it is not so easy to deal with a remarkable amount of resources, keeping these resources possibly intact and possibly increase it a long time. I have to express my gratitude to the president of the fund along years, Peter Hernold, Paul Dietrich Klindberger, Luisa Burgers-Giussani, Achille Casanova, Claudio Generali, and today to Giselle Girgis-Musi. All these persons have done a lot. Science, professionality, and capacity to keep their own duties in a very admirable ways. Each one of you knows the role of the General Prize Committee, who is today chaired by Professor Maiani, who is here and will speak after myself, and being the president of the so-called humanities section, which is in a certain way autonomous but not autonomous. It's a very kind of hybrid, but is Peter Kwon, who did his work in an admirable way. So many thanks to all these people. But I have always to say that the contribution of what we call in an improper way the staff has been important along many years, very important indeed. And since many years, Suzanne Verder has been a remarkable added value to our work, which means to be sure that the role of a General Secretary is much important in such institution. It is not my duty to go through the success of the choices of the General Prize Committee, but I want to mention two personalities who, one since yesterday and the other since some time, are members of the two bodies. One is Marta Cartabia, who was the President of Constitutional Court and the First Lady in the Italian Republic history, who is now full member of General Prize Committee. He had a period of absentia because the role of Minister of Justice. And since yesterday, we have in the board of the Balzan Foundation Premio, Cristina Messa, who has been since 1 month ago the Minister of Research and Universities. And before that was probably one of the first colleague, woman, rector of a very important university in Milan. I am sure that also these two outstanding ladies will do a lot for Balzan. Of course, I conclude with many thanks to the President of the Italian Republic, who along years always gave their support to Balzan. Unfortunately, the President Mattarella, Sergio Mattarella, Professor Sergio Mattarella, can't be with us today for many institutional reasons. But this day, later in the afternoon, President Mattarella will receive the laureates of this year, of course, and a delegation of Balzan Foundation Prize and Balzan Foundation Fund. And the Palace of Quirinale has the history of the institutional connection with the Presidency of the Italian Republic started 60 years ago in that so-called location. This palace has a very long and interesting history because since 1871, the Pope went out this palace because the palace became the official residence of the King of Italy and then the President of Italian Republic. Many thanks for your patience, and the floor to Professor Antonelli, who give the floor to Professor Maiani. Many thanks.
Madame l'ambassadrice de Suisse en Italie, Mesdames les représentantes des ambassadrices... Merci. Je recommence. Madame l'ambassadrice de Suisse en Italie, Mesdames les représentantes des ambassades des États-Unis et du Canada, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est à mon tour de vous remercier chaleureusement de bien vouloir participer à cette journée de remise des prix qui est la plus importante journée pour la Fondation Balzan. Mesdames les lauréates et les lauréats, et messieurs les lauréats, c'est avec plaisir que j'associe la Fondation Fondo, sise en Suisse, à Zurich, aux paroles du président Alberto Quadrio Curcio pour vous dire à quel point nous sommes fiers de décerner les prix Balzan aux éminentes personnalités que vous êtes, qui se sont distinguées de manière exceptionnelle dans divers domaines des sciences et de la culture. Je suis particulièrement heureuse de souligner que les membres de la Fondation Balzan Fonds ont souhaité être présents aujourd'hui à Rome, témoignant en cela la conviction avec laquelle notre fondation contribue à atteindre les ambitieux objectifs humanitaires, scientifiques et culturels que constitue son essence même. Le grand intérêt que porte également le gouvernement suisse à la Fondation Balzan est confirmé par le message respectueux de considération et d'encouragement que le président de la Confédération suisse, M. Ignacio Cassis, m'a prié de vous transmettre aujourd'hui dans le cadre de cette cérémonie de remise des prix. En tant que président de la Confédération suisse, je salue chaleureusement toutes les personnalités présentes. Mes félicitations les plus sincères vont aux lauréates et aux lauréats. À la Fondation Balzan, je tiens à exprimer ma gratitude pour son engagement à soutenir la culture, l'art, la science, l'humanité, la paix et la fraternité entre les peuples. Aujourd'hui, plus que jamais, la contribution de la Fondation Balzan est d'une grande importance pour placer ces valeurs au centre du discours international. La présente cérémonie de remise des prix Balzan 2022 concrétise la volonté et l'ambition de la Fondation Balzan d'encourager la culture et la science à travers le monde, sans distinction de nationalité, d'origine ou de religion. Mais au travers de ces 4 prix, chacun doté de 750 000 francs suisses, la Fondation Balzan ne souhaite pas seulement récompenser l'excellence, elle se soucie également du futur. Les lauréates et lauréats Balzan devront, en effet, consacrer la moitié du montant des prix à financer un projet de recherche dans leurs domaines respectifs. Ces recherches devront être conduites de préférence par de jeunes chercheuses et chercheurs. Ceci est une caractéristique importante et particulière des prix Balzan. La Fondation Balzan Fonds, sise à Zurich, a pour tâche de préserver, d'administrer et d'accroître le patrimoine de la Fondation, de sorte à pouvoir mettre année après année à disposition de la Fondation Balzan Premio, sise à Milan, les moyens financiers nécessaires à l'exécution de ces tâches, tout particulièrement la remise des prix annuels. L'année 2022 est marquée par un effondrement des marchés financiers, une inflation galopante, un resserrement des politiques monétaires, un redressement des taux d'intérêt et une contraction de l'activité économique. Le tout sur un fond de guerre en Europe après l'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie. Bien des économistes se demandent si nous quittons définitivement l'époque de la dite grande modération, qui débuta dans les années 80 et fut caractérisée par une forte croissance et une inflation faible ou même inexistante, pour retourner à une économie dite de boom-bust cycles, c'est-à-dire des cycles passant de l'euphorie au désespoir. Guerre, catastrophes climatiques, pandémies, crise énergétique et alimentaire, vieillissement de la population et des infrastructures, fragmentation et polarisation engendrent aujourd'hui une très grande instabilité. À bien des égards, le monde contemporain nous fait penser à l'époque baroque. Il convient de relever ici qu'au-delà des crises désastreuses de cette époque, elle a également vu jaillir un formidable élan d'innovation. Espérons que le désordre actuel débouchera sur une vague d'innovation, de regroupement et de solutions aux défis auxquels nous devons faire face aujourd'hui. Entre la réalité et l'espoir, plaçons le curseur du côté de l'espoir. Gageons que les acteurs économiques et les marchés financiers sauront réorienter leurs activités et les flux financiers dans un sens permettant de relever les nombreux défis actuels et à venir, évidemment, et contribueront ainsi à moyen terme à un retour de la stabilité et de la paix. D'ici là, nous espérons et pensons que les réserves sagement accumulées pendant les bonnes années nous permettront de continuer à remettre annuellement et sans interruption les prestigieux prix Balzan. Permettez-moi pour conclure de souligner à quel point nous sommes fiers du caractère italo-suisse de notre fondation. Nous sommes convaincus que ces activités reflètent parfaitement le dialogue et les influences culturelles réciproques de nos deux pays. Je vous remercie encore une fois, mesdames et messieurs, de votre présence et de votre attention. Merci.
Signora e signori Presidenti, signora Ambasciatrice della Federazione Svizzera, autorità, illustri partecipanti. Nel settembre 2022 il Comitato Generale Premi della Fondazione Balzan, composto dai professori Frances Ashcroft, Marta Cartabia, Sir Klöting, Paolo De Bernardis, Borge Dideriksen, Salva El-Shawan Castello Branco, Charles Godfrey, Nathalie Einich, Jules Hoffmann, Peter Kuhn, Luciano Maiani, Thomas Meissen, Stephen Mulhall, Marian Schwegman, Maria Stromme e Peter Suter, ha preso in esame le molte proposte pervenute da accademie e università ed eminenti personalità della cultura di tutto il mondo e dopo lunghe e appassionate discussioni ha scelto i vincitori dei premi 2022. Ringrazio sentitamente i colleghi del Comitato per il prezioso contributo prestato nel lavoro di selezione che ogni anno ci vede impegnati a esaminare candidature di altissimo livello in materie sempre diverse, il cui carattere molto spesso innovativo e pionieristico rende il nostro compito arduo, ma allo stesso tempo stimolante. Anche quest'anno il premio Balzan ha pienamente raggiunto uno dei suoi scopi fondamentali, cioè l'integrazione in una prospettiva interdisciplinare degli studi e delle ricerche più promettenti negli ambiti di studio che abbiamo preso in esame. A nome del Comitato mi rallegro per la scelta di 5 illustri premiati che spiccano per l'eccezionalità delle loro intuizioni, per l'impatto trasformativo delle loro scoperte nei rispettivi campi di indagine e per la propensione a cercare possibili soluzioni alle grandi sfide poste all'umanità. Ai premiati Balzan 2022 rinnovo quindi le più vive e sincere congratulazioni. Il premio Balzan 2022 per l'etnomusicologia è stato assegnato a Philip Bolman del Department of Music dell'Università di Chicago per il suo contributo fondamentale all'etnomusicologia e più in generale alla ricerca musicale e per i suoi studi su musica e nazionalismo europeo, musica, razza e incontro coloniale, globalizzazione, intersezioni tra musica e religione, musica ebraica in epoca moderna ed esecuzione di musiche urbane ebraiche improntate alla ricerca storica.
Mr. President, members of the Balzan Foundation and the Prize Committee, dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Ethnomusicology is a field that is fundamentally dedicated to understanding societies and cultures through encounter with the sonic and aesthetic practices in the lives of humans throughout the world. It is a field concerned with engaging the individual and the collective alike. Above all, their interaction and the local and global diversity it makes possible. The work I have accomplished over many years has only been possible because of the individuals, communities, and collectives I have encountered as an ethnomusicologist whose field has consistently been international. The extreme honor and profound humility I feel as the recipient of the International Balzan Prize in Ethnomusicology are all the greater because I was able to listen to and hear the vox populi, the voices of the people, the collective song that yields moral and ethical action. It is with the deepest gratitude that I accept the Balzan Prize. Although many think that ethnomusicology is a relatively new field, made possible through the implementation of modern technologies that record, preserve, and disseminate sound, the aesthetic and philosophical foundations of the field stretch to the earliest attempts to understand human societies and the natural and sacred worlds of which they are parts. The narrative and musical genres that ethnomusicologists study, for example, epic song, are among the oldest oral and literary forms, the transmission of which depends on the power of song to engender common belief systems and political unity. The earliest philosophical and theoretical works on music and the complex of aesthetic practices from which it is inseparable, such as the 3rd century Natya Shastra, circulated globally for centuries and continue to influence the understanding and practice of the arts across South and Southeast Asia in the 21st century. It is hardly surprising that ethnomusicology will become one of the first fields dedicated to the truly global pursuit of knowledge. Critical to the global pursuit of knowledge, moreover, is the search for how knowledge, through music and sound practices, shapes ways of being in the world. The ontologies whereby individuals and collectives shape the everyday and seek the transcendent. For the past half-century, ethnomusicologists have employed ethnography to set a more sweeping ontological turn in music studies in motion, exploring new sites of encounter opened by media studies to popular music, and mobilizing critical sets of inquiry into the political. The historical longue durée of ethnomusicology today joins in counterpoint with the history of the present. the political crises of the 21st century, the plight of refugees seeking to cross national borders, the agency of music in giving voice to peoples of color or difference, the challenges of and to musical heritage, the struggle for sovereignty against violence. Increasingly, these occupy the global borderlands to which ethnomusicologists take critical practices of ethnography. Such borderlands, too, become precarious as the global climate crisis intensifies, and they require music scholars to develop new approaches to encountering the ontologies of music in the Anthropocene, not least by listening into the sound worlds of non-humans. I particularly welcome the International Balzan Prize in Ethnomusicology because it allows me to make a critical contribution to the ontological turn that draws the interdisciplinary collective of students and scholars inspired by the modern field of ethnomusicology to the sonic borderlands in the global history of the present. By focusing on sonic borderlands, this new Balzan collective will create new disciplinary connections and enhance particularly the conversations that have traditionally taken place across borders. Young scholars with roots in the social sciences will find encouragement to deepen ethnographic study, especially along the borders crossed by migrants and refugees. Music historians and philosophers will have opportunities to explore and realign aesthetic borders. By drawing together, these will have the numerous disciplines that contribute to ethnomusicological thought. The Balzan Prize can strengthen the collaborative potential of a much larger field of scientific inquiry. Critical to the role of such scientific inquiry, moreover, is that it can also become public-facing, and that its programs and publications can enrich and engage the broadest possible collective. Throughout this acceptance speech, I have emphasized the presence and the role of the collective of the field of ethnomusicology as well as of the publics it reaches. I do so not only to provide a concise intellectual history of the field, but also to express my indebtedness to the many from whom I have learned. My coming of age as an ethnomusicologist was possible because of remarkable teachers. Bruno Nettel at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Amnon Shiloach in Jerusalem, Karl Dahlhaus and Otto Holzapfel in Berlin and Freiburg im Breisgau, and many more. I learned early on that my fieldwork could and should take me to those who labored, farmers and workers, and soon thereafter it would take me to those who suffered, to the immigrants and refugees who fled Europe from the Shoah, and to those who were unable to do so. I have found it critical to enter the spaces of encounter unsettled by colonialism, racism, and genocide. Even under such difficult circumstances, those with whom I have conducted fieldwork become my teachers. The same must be said about my students, who are the most critical and caring of all my teachers. Just why I was able to hold remarkably diverse and international visiting professorships in the United States, Germany, Israel, Austria, Italy, Croatia, I don't really know. But surely this was the reason the collective of students from whom I have learned has increased immeasurably. Please permit me to conclude these remarks accepting the International Balzan Prize in Ethnomusicology by expressing my appreciation again to the Balzan Foundation and to the remarkable collective who have made my work and career possible. I am deeply honored that the Balzan Prize now opens an important new chapter in our common encounters in ethnomusicology. Thank you very much.
Il premio Balzan 2022 per la filosofia morale è stato assegnato a Martha Nussbaum della Law School of Philosophy Department dell'Università di Chicago per il suo incessante contributo a un ampio spettro di argomenti filosofici che insieme ridefiniscono la comprensione del nostro essere etico, per la sua concezione trasformativa degli obiettivi della giustizia sociale, tanto a livello locale che a livello globale, per la propensione a colmare il divario tra mondo accademico e società. Please.
Mr. President, members of the Balzan Foundation, dear friends, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely honored by the gift of this prize, and I feel great gratitude to the Balzan Foundation for recognizing my work. It's a great pleasure to be here in Rome for the ceremony and to make the acquaintance of members of the prize committee and the staff of the foundation. And I'm thrilled that the prize honors moral philosophy and that the foundation insists on supporting the work of younger scholars, two commitments that I think really urgent for our polarized world, which needs rigorous argument about foundational issues if it is to survive at all. I have many people to thank because my work gets a great deal of nourishment from its context. I've taught at the University of Chicago since 1995, appointed both in the law school and the philosophy department, with ancillary appointments in classics, political science, religious ethics, and the Committee on Southern Asian Studies. I could not do my work without that great university, both its law school and its philosophy department, which have created an ideal environment for work and teaching. If I singled out all the individuals I want to thank, starting, as I would have to, with my family and my elementary and high school teachers, this speech would go on, and I would be played off the stage like those self-indulgent actors at the Academy Award ceremonies. So I'll just stick to the university. I want to thank two deans who strongly support my work, Dean Tom Miles of the Law School and Dean Ann Robertson of the Humanities Division. The ease of doing interdisciplinary work, part of the culture of the university as a whole, and rarely found elsewhere, has meant a great deal to me over the years. Above all, though, my life is spent in two places: the philosophy department, where over the years I've worked with marvelous graduate students who tell me exactly where I am wrong and who do new creative work that inspires me, and in the law school, where the students are superb and often mingle valuably in classes and seminars with the philosophy graduate students, since, unlike law students in most countries, they have a liberal arts background before starting law and are quite comparable to the best PhD students. I want particularly to mention the rich faculty culture of our law school, where so many of my manuscripts have been poked and prodded by critical questions asked in the best Socratic spirit, always civil and respectful, but often skeptical and deeply challenging. People are so generous, giving their time to others. I remember one day on a Friday when I finished a draft of a lecture I'd been working on for a long time and was pretty nervous about the public occasion and the speech. I sent the draft to 6 of my law school colleagues that day, and by Monday, I had received immensely helpful written comments from all 6. I hope to match that in my own conduct, but it's a daunting standard to live up to. If there's just one colleague whom I must thank by name, it's my frequent co-author and friend, Saul Levmore, one of our nation's foremost experts on law and economics, and a dear friend. He never lets me become complacent. He always tells me that I'm wrong and why. And I hope that rather like Cicero and his friend Atticus, our exchanges and even jokes improve our insights into the highly relevant theme of aging, on which we co-authored a book in 2017, and improve, too, the actual experience of aging. We're working now on a new project about group identities. However, 2 different occasions for sadness have touched my work life in recent years. The first has been the death of my daughter, Rachel Nussbaum-Wiechert, a lawyer for animal rights, in 2019, of a drug-resistant fungal infection after successful transplant surgery. Rachel and I published articles on animal rights together, and she was a huge inspiration for my latest book, Justice for Animals, Our Collective Responsibility, which will appear in January. I like to think that with that book, I'm continuing her commitments and helping them to flourish. And my plan for the Balzan Prize is that I'm creating a project that will help younger scholars in moral philosophy and in law to follow that path and contribute their new insights. Her widowed husband, Gert Wiechert, currently lives with me and has been an immense support and a dear friend. He is here in Rome at the ceremony. The other sadness is that Robert Zimmer, the president of the University of Chicago during most of my years there and a close friend, is very ill at this point from terminal brain cancer. Bob is the paradigm of a good university leader, driven by ideas rather than profit, determined to create spaces for the widest possible range of viewpoints, and endlessly respectful of faculty freedom. I hope this award honors his life, and I would like to dedicate this speech to those 2 people, Rachel Nussbaum-Wiechert and Robert Zimmer, who in such different ways have made our world better and more just. Thank you very much for this honor.
Il premio Balzan 2022 per i biomateriali e per la nanomedicina e l'ingegneria dei tessuti è stato assegnato a Robert Langer del Massachusetts Institute of Technology per la ricerca all'avanguardia sui biopolimeri e sui biomateriali e sulla loro sintesi, per aver sviluppato il campo della nanomedicina, compresi i progressi relativi ai vaccini mRNA e all'ingegneria dei tessuti. Le sue scoperte rivoluzionarie hanno aperto la strada a innovazioni mediche nel rilascio controllato di macromolecole con numerose applicazioni.
Mr. President, members of the Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I feel so privileged to receive this remarkable award from the Balzan Foundation. It's really an honor to be here with these other recipients and also to follow in the footsteps of the people who have won it before. I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about kind of the winding path that took me here. So I'm a chemical engineer, and when I finished my degree in 1974 at MIT, pretty much all my friends, at that time there was a gas shortage, so pretty much all my friends went to work for oil companies. And I thought, well, I'll do what everybody else does, and I applied to those companies. I actually got 20 job offers, four from Exxon alone. And I wasn't very good, but it didn't matter. They had so many openings. But I remember when I went to those interviews, they'd say, well, if you could just increase the yield of these petrochemicals by a tiny percentage, that would be worth billions of dollars. And I remember thinking as I would fly back to Boston that I really didn't want to spend my life doing that. And one of the things that I'd done, or when I was a graduate student, is I spent a lot of time when I was supposed to be doing my thesis helping start a school for disadvantaged high school students in Cambridge. And I got very involved in creating new chemistry curriculum, and so and math curricula. And so one day I saw an ad to do just that as an assistant professor at what's called City College of New York. So I wrote them a letter applying for a job, but they didn't write me back. But I really liked that idea, so I found about 40 ads like that. I wrote to all of those schools, and I don't think any wrote me back. So that wasn't going so well. So I thought, what other way could I use my chemical engineering education to help people? And I thought about medicine. So I wrote to a lot of hospitals and medical schools. They didn't write me back either. And then one day I remember going to the lab, and one of the older scientists said to me, he said, Bob, there's a surgeon in Boston named Judah Folkman. And he said, sometimes he hires unusual people. He thought very highly of Dr. Folkman. I won't say what he thought about me. But at any rate, so he offered me this job, and I began working at Children's Hospital. I was the only engineer there. And the project that I began working on involved developing tiny little particles, micro or nanoparticles, to deliver substances that were very large molecules to study how cancer blood vessels grew and hopefully lead to new ways to treat cancer, which ultimately they did, but not for many years. When I mentioned that these substances are large, just to give you ideas of what I mean by a large molecule, like a protein is a large molecule, and some of you may have heard of DNA or RNA, those are large molecules. And nobody had ever before that come up with a way to take little particles and encapsulate these substances in them and deliver them over a period of time. In fact, the literature said you couldn't do that. I think the only thing I had going for me is I hadn't read the literature. So I tried to do this. I actually spent several years in the laboratory trying to find even one way to get this to work. But what I did find is at first I found over 200 different ways to get it to not work. But finally I made a discovery that showed that you could do this. We published it in the journal Nature. But when I first did this, pretty much the entire scientific community ridiculed it. My first 9 research grants were rejected very, very soundly. And then by this time I thought, well, maybe I'll apply for faculty jobs again, and this time in chemical engineering, my discipline. But when I did, no chemical engineering department in the world would hire me. They said, this bio stuff you're doing doesn't make any sense. Finally, I got a job offer in a nutrition department. And the reason I got it, the guy who was the head of it, Nevin Scrimshaw, who was a visionary nutritionist, he liked me, but he was kind of what I call a benevolent dictator kind of department head, meaning that he offered me the job, but he didn't bother to ask anybody else in the department what they thought, which might have been okay, except for the fact that the next year after I joined the department, he left. So a lot of the senior faculty decided to give me advice, and their advice is I should leave too. There I was, getting my grants turned down, people not believing in my research, and even having little hope of even keeping my lowly assistant professor job. But I kept trying, and I was fortunate enough that eventually scientists in the medical community started using some of the principles and some of the inventions I'd made, and I'm still actually at MIT. So they kind of turned around. I like to think, as I look what's happened over now many years, that I've gotten involved in, we've patented some of these things, gotten involved in having companies develop them, and I've even started some myself. And now some of these discoveries and inventions are being used to treat literally millions, maybe billions of people with diseases like opioid addiction, schizophrenia, heart disease, and diabetes. It also, going back to the work I did with Dr. Folkman, helped enable the discovery of new drugs like Avastin and Eylea that are widely used all over the world to treat millions of people that have had cancer or eye diseases like macular degeneration. Most recently, I got involved in starting a company called Moderna. And there we use these same principles to create nanoparticles to deliver messenger RNA vaccines, which are now being used all over the world. Pfizer and BioNTech also use those same kind of principles. And then the other general area that I had an idea on a number of years ago with my colleague Jay Vacanti, who's a surgeon, was maybe we could create new tissues and organs from scratch, combining materials and cells and things like that. And that's led to new, like artificial skin for patients that are burned and also have diabetic skin ulcers. And actually many other treatments like for hearing loss, spinal cord repair, creating new blood vessels are in clinical trials. And I'm also hoped, and it's starting to lead to what I'll call organs and tissues on a chip, which could someday, I hope, reduce the use of both animals and humans in drug testing and possibly could accelerate things like drug discovery. So as I conclude, I just hope that my story of having a lot of rejection but keeping on trying and keeping on dreaming and facing a lot of opposition and ridicule is illustrative of some of the things that often happen to scientists, but you keep trying and hopefully things work out. I never would have been here without having had just amazing students and postdocs at MIT over many, many years, and having a terrific staff both in the past and today. I also wouldn't be here without my wife, Laura, who's been just a tremendous supporter, and my children, two of whom are here today. And again, I want to thank you very, very much. It's a tremendous privilege to receive this tremendous award. Thank you.
Il premio Balzan 2022 per la glaciazione e la dinamica delle calotte polari è stato assegnato a Dorte Dahl Jensen del Niels Bohr Institute, Università di Copenaghen, e Johannes Hans Erlemans, professore emerito all'Institute for Marine and Atmospheric, Utrecht University, per i fondamentali e innovativi contributi congiunti e complementari alla dinamica della glaciazione delle calotte polari e per la portata che hanno avuto sulla comprensione del cambiamento climatico e dei suoi meccanismi. Tali contributi hanno aperto la strada a proiezioni più attendibili del comportamento della calotta polare e dei relativi cambiamenti del livello del mare.
Dear Presidents and Chairs, dear members and supporting staff of the Balzan Foundation, colleagues, family, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here. I'm slightly frightened, but I think I'll get through. During most of the 4.5 billion years of the history of the Earth, there were no glaciers. At least that's what the geological and geomorphological records tell us. So we live in a very special period where glaciers and ice caps shrink, grow, and leave behind a very special landscape. In fact, glaciers and ice caps are the sculptors of the landscape of the Earth. The deep valleys we see in many parts of the world, fjords, are the result of glacial erosion. Glaciers are very effective in shaping the Earth. Glacial erosion is perhaps 10 times as effective as running water. So in spite of the fact that glaciers were here only for a short period of time, intermittently, they are very important. The thermal balance of the Earth is delicate. If we would have a distance between the Sun and the Earth of a few percent larger, we will probably always be in a glaciarized planet. If it would be a few percent less, we would never have any glaciers. So, as I always say, the master of the universe did a very good job for the glaciologists, because we're always kind of in between. What is also obvious from this action of glacial erosion is the formation of freshwater lakes. About 95%, believe me, 95% of all the lakes on the globe, including the beautiful lakes in northern Italy, are the result of glacial erosion. Giving a Balzan Prize to the subject of glaciation and ice sheet dynamics is really a great recognition of this field in geosciences. My co-prize winner, Dr. Dart Jensen, and me are the lucky ones, but of course we have many students and PhD students and postdocs behind us through the years, technicians also very important for our work. Without them, we would be nowhere. That should always be remembered. So we're very grateful for the recognition we get from the Balzan Foundation, and of course the opportunities to take some initiatives in which we involve young people. Maybe Dr. Dardiensi will say a few more words about this. I have studied glaciers and ice sheets for many years, of course. And I started with computer simulation. The glacial cycles of the Pleistocene have fascinated me from the beginning. I constructed computer models, running to the computer department with punch cards. You know, in this time it was extremely primitive. You would type punch cards, few hundred, deliver them to the operator, get your output back in a couple of hours, and then you discovered that at some point you had a period instead of a comma. You had to do it all over again. That's how we worked. Yes, but we made it. But it became clear to me that computer simulation of glacial cycles is nice, but it leaves too much freedom. We needed field experiments that would learn us more about the interaction of the atmosphere, the climate system if you like, and the glacier surface, exchange of mass and energy. And so the organization of field experiments with many weather stations and other equipment was inevitable. A lot of logistic problems, of course. You need a lot of money because you have to fly with helicopters and so on. But we did it and we learned a lot from that. And I dare to say that these field experiments were the basis for the much better computer models we have today. What also became a very important aspect of glaciological research is remote sensing. The observation from space has allowed us to do a better diagnosis of the present state of the glaciers. And we need that. We need to zoom in because we have a climate problem. We have a sea level that is rising at, well, the last decade, maybe 4 millimeters per year. And all signs point to a situation where this rise will increase. So we have the possibility now to combine computer simulation, experiments in the field, and Earth observation to do the best possible job. I published a projection of sea level about in 1989, I think was the first peer-reviewed projection really. And if you look at the modern projections published by the IPCC, it's rather similar. So in a way it's a bit sad that talking about energy transition and other things that we kind of lost 30 years. And I really hope that the trust in science and climate science in general will become larger in the future. What I did not do was looking into the ice sheets. I'm always interested in how the ice sheets behave in terms of shape and volume, how do they react to climate change. But there's a whole fascinating world inside the ice sheets. And that is the field of my co-prize winner, Dr. Dahl Jensen, so I leave it to her to talk about that. My children are here. They are not glaciologists, but I take them on glaciers every now and then, so they understand my passion. And I'm so happy they are here and that the Balzan Foundation has made this possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Balzan Prize with deep gratitude. It is inspiring, and above all, it makes me feel younger. Thank you very much.
Honored President, honored Prize Committee, members and supporting staff of the Balzan Foundation, dear Ambassador, family, friends, and colleagues. It is an extreme honor to receive the Balzan Prize, together with Hans Orlemann, my friend and colleague and collaborator through many, many years. It is a great recognition of my research, but not mine alone. To drill and analyze the deep ice cores from Greenland requires a team with a broad span of expertise. Earlier this year, we celebrated the 100-year day for Professor Willy Dansgaard, who pioneered ice core research in Denmark and in the world. He was my supervisor and mentor, and he started the Ice and Climate Group in Copenhagen that has developed since it started in the 1960s. In the spirit of Willy, I would like to acknowledge the skills of all in the research group and let you know how proud I am of the excellent researchers and the brilliant students here. Without them, it would not be possible. In that tone, also a great thanks to University of Copenhagen and all the research funds in Denmark that have supported our research. To look into the ice, to see the layers of snow and ice from years and years back in time, has created knowledge on the past climate unmatched by other sources. The deep ice cores from the Greenland ice sheet contain very high resolution climate records reaching more than 150,000 years back in time. The records show that our climate system has had large and abrupt changes in the past. Such abrupt changes, as seen in the glacial period, are very difficult to simulate with the present generation of climate models. The models predicting our future are well trained to simulate the climate of the last 150 years using the observations for the vast amount of observations and instrumental records. But would they be capable of predicting an abrupt change in the future as they can't do it in the past? That's a very scary question. Our research also shows that it was 5 degrees warmer over Greenland during the last interglacial period, the Eemian. During this long period of 5,000 years, the Greenland ice sheet lost mass corresponding to 2 meters of sea level rise, not more than 25% of the ice sheet. So you need a lot of heat and a long time to melt such a big ice sheet. It is good to know that the ice sheet is so resilient, but it's also worth noting that the temperatures predicted just in year 2100 exceed those we saw during this warm Eemian period. Back to the present time and my work together with Hans Orlemann. One of the most wonderful things we have done is to start and form the Cat House Summer School in the Italian Tyrol, together with geocacher from Austria. Here all the glaciers are disappearing and will probably first disappear again when we start cooling the climate. The first PhD summer school was held in 1995, and since then more than 500 students has participated. The networks formed and the proudness of being a Carthouse student is obvious and very strong in our research field. To inspire emerging researchers is probably the most important legacy to have, and hence I think we've done very well here. I have truly enjoyed being part of all the summer schools. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues at the Center of Earth Observation Science at the University of Manitoba. It has been a dream for me to extend my research to also look into the impact of the melting ice, the fresh water that's released into the ocean. The changing ocean conditions impact the living conditions for the people in the communities where fisheries and marine mammals are very important. How will their future look, and how can research by Indigenous and Western teams prepare them for the future? And for this, I'd like to thank the University of Manitoba to being so strong and letting me continue my research into this field. The Balzan Research Grant will be used to support a Canadian project to drill and support the observations and modeling of a little ice cap called Müller's Ice Cap, laying on the Axel Heidelberg's island far up in the northern Canada. We will model the ice sheet and the ice and the glaciers there in support of the work, trying to understand how the Arctic ice has changed back in time. I'd like to end this talk by thanking my husband, JP, who's here in the audience. We've always been a team. We've been working together as professors at the university, and we've also been a team bringing up 4 children together, which I'd like to thank you for. And I'd also like to thank my son, Gorm, that showed up last night and joins us today. Thank you for representing our 4 children. And thank you very much, everyone here.
Cerimonia di conferimento dei premi e l'accettazione da parte dei premiati si è conclusa. Io ringrazio molto il Presidente Antonelli, Presidente dei Lincei, per l'ospitalità e, se mi consente, anche per l'amicizia che ha sempre dimostrato alle fondazioni Balzan. Grazie Presidente, e a lei di nuovo la parola.
Io ringrazio soprattutto la Fondazione Balzan perché ci consente ogni anno in Svizzera e l'anno seguente in Italia di poter ospitare questa bella cerimonia e soprattutto di poter sentire i premiati e conoscerli. Quindi dichiaro chiusa la cerimonia e vi invito al cocktail che è previsto nell'altra sala.